All right, so yes, hello again, everybody. My name is Beth Schill, as I said, and I am the manager of employer relations and industry advising. And I work in the areas of government, nonprofit, and education at the Colley Career Education Center. And with me today is Tina Gaddy.
Hi, I am Tina Gaddy. I manage undergraduate professional development in the School of Foreign Service. Work really closely with the Colley Career Center, but I'm housed in the Graduate Career Center in SFS.
So the purpose of our meeting today is really just to go over the application process for the summer of 2021 State Department internship programs. Tina and I are going to walk you through the application process, what you might see, as well as primarily answer any of your questions, and hopefully help share some tips and tricks. To begin, the application is due on September 16th. I highly recommend that you do not wait until the 16th to submit your application because, your wireless could go out, the State Department servers could crash, any number of things could happen. So I advise that you not wait until the 16th to submit your application. So that gives you about 8 days, which I think should be plenty of time for you to put together a solid application. All right. So to start, I'm going to be pulling up my computer to show you what the application looks like. Just a moment. All right, so, okay, all right. So when you're looking at the internship program, this page, the landing page for the U.S. Department of State Student Internship Program, I would go ahead and read this page in detail. There is a lot of information here, including what is expected. So for example, this section here where it talks about the duties of what you might be doing as an intern, make sure that you read that in detail, as well as the internship assignments. The key, I think, to a successful application for the State Department is really not just being able to speak to the State Department and being like, I want to work in the Foreign Service, or I want to be Secretary of State one day, or I'm really interested in diplomacy, but really understanding the different geographic bureaus and the functional bureaus and going and researching them and understanding what that particular office does. And we're not just talking about the mission statement, really going beyond that and also looking at what are some of the different things that they're doing in terms of, what are they reporting about, what is on their social media channels, going ahead and following them on social media, seeing what are some of the latest things that are coming out. If you're looking at a geographic bureau and you're wanting to intern, say, at a specific embassy, following the ambassador, seeing what the ambassador is putting out, or looking at historically what the relationship with the US has been and what different ambassadors have done, in addition to a lot of the other skills that they may be looking for. And they also do have this cool tool where you can find out the best office fit for your major. So go ahead and really take advantage of what is on their website. There's a lot of information here about the process, what to expect, and also things that are required of you. Okay, so if we, whoops, my computer is very touchy. So if we hit apply now, you are taken to USA Jobs, and this is the main portal for your State Department application. You can see here some important information, the opening and closing dates, 9/16/2020. The work schedule for the summer is a full-time internship, so that's considered about approximately 40 hours a week, and it is unpaid, and it's a temporary position. So once your time is up, you're no longer a State Department employee. They're saying that it is not telework eligible. So what that means is if this whole coronavirus situation were to continue into the summer, the likelihood of this being canceled because of continued coronavirus restrictions is fairly high. So I would highly recommend that any of you that are looking to this as an option for the summer, you're looking also at plans B, C, D, and E, because as the last 6 months have shown, there's really no way to accurately predict what will happen over the next 6 months in terms of the virus. Add into that the uncertainty around the presidential election, and it's really anyone's game kind of what might happen over the next little while. So just be prepared that that might happen. All right, so now we're looking at the duties and the summary. This is again, takes you back to that page where it talks about the different bureaus and offices you want to look at, as well as the responsibilities. Now, this is where you really start to get into the meat of the position description. Often what I recommend students that you do is I print this out or find some way to look within the responsibilities and look at some of the key verbs that are in here. So for example, student interns have written reports on human rights issues, participated in trade negotiations, assisted with citizen services or visa work, helped Americans in distress, coordinate international conferences and visits, research economic or environmental issues, monitor and evaluate things, support educational and cultural exchange, et cetera, et cetera. These key verbs that you see in here are keys to putting together your federal resume, which Tina and I will also get to. And then down here, they talk about requirements, conditions of employment. You have to make sure that you can meet all these requirements. When they talk about credit hours, they will be looking at your credit hours at the end of this semester or the end of this academic year. And you will be required to submit at least an unofficial transcript to prove that you have the credit hours that you are needed. And you have to be a continuing student. So if you are graduating in May, you cannot apply for this application round. All right. And then they talk about education requirements. So you must have a 3.0 or higher and 60 hours. They have some information here about security clearances. Only looks like only one bureau, the Bureau of Diplomatic Security, requires a security clearance. Some of the other bureaus require what is called a public trust. So that's just kind of your basic background check that you do for a lot of different jobs. Make sure you don't have any outstanding arrest warrants or anything like that. That can sometimes take time. So you just want to make sure when you apply that you're doing all your paperwork promptly. This is important, reasonable accommodations. If you need any help due to a disability in completing your application, whether that's more time or assistance, you can go ahead and use this email to request a reasonable accommodation. It will not be held against you. It is something that will actually help you be a more successful applicant. So that's just something if you have need of that. And then finally, how you will be evaluated. They talk about how well do you meet the qualifications above. Now, part of that is, are you a student? Check. Do you have a 3.0 or higher? Check. Are you, a good upstanding citizen? Okay. But then again, when we were looking up at the top where we talked about some of the sample duties and they talk about, researching, analyzing, coordinating, things like that, they want to see evidence of that in your application. So that's a little bit about the evaluations. There's also something called questions where they basically verify that you are who you say you are and that you do have the experiences that you stated that you have in your resume. And so these questions, you can click on this and see what these questions are. Oftentimes it's just very basic information. Yep, what's your GPA? Are you a full-time student? Or do you attend an accredited university? Will you be enrolled after this? Sometimes they have questions for the males on the phone. They have questions about, are you registered for selective service? That's important in federal government. So just, preview these questions so that you have an idea of what it is that they're looking for. Okay. And then they talk about required documents. You can upload them. You can fax them. I was hearing from some students that there was something going on the other day with uploading documents. So just be aware that sometimes the government servers don't accept certain types of files. So, again, don't wait until the last minute, just in case you have to run to an open Kinko's and try and find a fax machine to fax in your documents. And they talk about having a system generated cover sheet. So you want to make sure that you're doing everything exactly as they request. Okay, so the rest of it you can read. It's all about benefits and everything. But I wanted to turn it over to Tina to see what tips she may have on how to start up the application.
Sure, thank you, Beth. Okay, so everything that Beth talked about is absolutely correct. I wanted to be able to answer any questions that you may have about how to make your application stronger, and if you're addressing the different job descriptions in the bureaus that you're interested in your descriptions in your federal resume. So one thing that's happening is last year you were able to upload your resume. This year, in order to move forward in the application, you have to do the resume builder in USA Jobs. And you can still upload your resume along with it, but you will not be able to move forward in a process without the federal resume, which includes every job you've ever had that you'll put into the system. Make sure when you're doing the descriptions for those jobs that you're very detailed in the experiences that you've had, but also make sure that some of your experiences, if they match similar experience that's required in the jobs that you're applying to, in the internship you're applying to, that you are using some of that same terminology if it fits. Don't fluff and sort of exaggerate your resume, but if it fits, then make sure that that appears in your federal resume as well. One of the tips that we had, we're kind of getting close to the date. Our diplomat in residence, who is Yolanda Kearney, she has been our assigned diplomat in residence for the DC Metro since last summer, since August of last year. She has a Facebook page that is her official channel for reaching out to her. I highly recommend that you reach out to her to ask for advice, to do sort of an informational interview with her. I'm going to share the way that you can contact her now. For 1 second. So again, their official channel for reaching out to students is Facebook, which is a very old-fashioned statement. However, that's what it is. So this is her Facebook page for the DC Metro. She puts a lot of information about the different roles that they're hiring for and just deadlines and things like that. So I do suggest following it. But if you scroll down, you'll see her appointment availability. Unfortunately, she meets on every Friday. She does phone calls from about 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. depending on the week. This particular Friday, there is no time available. All of those slots have been booked. So you may not get a slot with her before the application deadline. However, she may still be a really useful resource after you've submitted to answer any questions that you may have about the interview process and any other questions that you have about working at state. So if you go here, every date is selected here just because it's a Facebook sort of algorithm, but if you choose on the Friday, you'll have several times that you can pick from that she has available. And these are brief 15-minute conversations. So before you do that, I suggest having all of your questions sort of set up so that you're using your time wisely because you don't get a ton of time with her. You're also able to make several appointments. So if you make one for this Friday and you didn't get everything answered, I would suggest following up with another Friday or a couple of weeks. Leave a little bit of space in between to give some other students some time to meet with her as well. One of the other things that we're doing, because we're virtual and we're hoping that because we're not able to do these large scale info sessions on campus, we suggest reaching out to some of our alumni who are also at state. So there's a couple of ways that you can do that. You can go to Hoya Gateway. Hopefully all of you are familiar with it. If you've met with me, you should be because I talk about it a lot. And here you're able to do some searches. You browse the network and you can do searches for State Department employees who are Georgetown alumni and Georgetown current students as well, current undergraduate and graduate students. This is helpful for a peer networking opportunity because you're able to get some insight from people who have done this internship in the past or not this past summer, but summers before that, or people who are currently working at state and get some information from them. In Hoya Gateway, everybody who is listed in Hoya Gateway, every alum, has decided that they want to help current students. So this is a great resource to use because everybody wants to help you as much as possible. One tip I've found though is that in Hoya Gateway, not everything is as completely updated as we would like. Sometimes alumni will volunteer their services in Hoya Gateway and then forget to update us when they've changed their jobs. So I always do a double check. And if you find someone that you'd like to reach out to, then I follow up and go to LinkedIn to find that person and make sure that their information is updated and reach out to them in either system. And they've been pretty responsive. I've personally found that my response rate in Hoya Gateway is about 50%, and my response rate in LinkedIn is about 65 to 70%. So you're very likely to get a response. And if you reach out to at least 3 people, you're more likely to get some responses and start your networking from there. The easy way to find Georgetown alumni on LinkedIn is here. Go to the Department of State LinkedIn page. There's 26,000 employees listed just as sort of just under Department of State. I choose filters and Georgetown. You can also drill down if you want the School of Business, the law school, the School of Foreign Service. It depends on how people sort of list their schools on their personal LinkedIn page, but Georgetown is if you're using just a regular Georgetown, you're gonna get a larger number, and you can select more than one. And so we just apply, and you'll see there's 874 results that are listed just as Department of State, just at Georgetown and not sort of any of the other colleges. So you have a lot of people to choose from. Obviously, you can go through their titles and decide who would be a better fit for your personal interest. So if you have a regional interest in, say, Central Africa, you may want to look for people who have worked in that region or who are sort of focused on that region. If you're more interested in specific types of policy and diplomacy, you'll want to follow that as well. It sorts by your closest contacts to you, but I would suggest also reaching out to people who appear further down the list, because those people may not be contacted quite as often, and so you want to make sure you reach out to them as well. You'll start your conversations with just wanting to know more about their work. You're not asking them to connect you to a job or to do any of that, but you want to know more about their work and sort of start the relationship more naturally so that you're able to ask their advice on how to interview successfully, how to make the most of your time if you are granted an internship at the State Department, so that while you're there, you are using your time wisely to make a lot of connections and use that to pivot into a long-term career in the future. That share. And so at this time, I think we want to, a lot of this is just an sort of a Q&A section. And I know you guys have had a lot of questions about the application process, how to make your application stronger. So we're kind of just open to whatever you want to know. And so now I think we'll open it up to some questions.
Yep.
And do you want them to put them in the chat?
Yeah, so what you can do is you can put it in the chat, and I believe it should go to me, and then I'll call on you, and you can unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you so wish, and go ahead and ask your question. So first send it to me in a chat, and then that way too, we'll try and, like, if we get a lot of like the same question, we'll only have it answered once, so that we can try and cover as much ground as possible. All right, so feel free to chat and let me know if you have any questions. Also, I sent in the chat to everybody. We have an article, resource and handshake, called Careers in Government. And on that page, there are examples of federal resumes, as well as a brochure for the State Department internship application program. So be sure to check out that article and look especially at the attachments on the page for additional information. Okay, so please submit any questions you have via chat. This is your chance.
Well, and while we're
okay, we got one.
Okay.
All right. So Satya, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi.
Yeah.
I was wondering, I saw like both opportunities on the website, but I was just wondering the difference between the Pathways programs and the two categories within the Pathways. So like the internship experience program and the temporary program, and then the regular. I know one of the differences is that one is paid and one is not, but I was just wondering, I tried looking on the website, but I was just wondering if the Pathways means a certain commitment afterwards or what that is.
That's a good question. So yes, and the one of the main differentiators is one is paid versus one is unpaid. Pathways also, what it does imply is it's about as close to a path into government, a guaranteed path into government service as you can get. What happens is after you complete your assigned period, you have 120 days to what they call convert to a full-time position. And sometimes the pathways internships can also go on like throughout the school year as well. So you could maybe start over the summer and then continue on into the school year. It depends on the particular office. But say you're going into your senior year and you get a pathways internship, you get paid, you work part-time, and then at the end of that, you have 120 days to find a job, not just within State Department, but within the federal government in general. And you don't have to do the competitive application process along with everybody else. So, you know, your resume, when you apply to a position, goes to the top of the pile. You get interviewed at least. You may not get the job. You still have to show that you're the most qualified, and you still have to go through all the steps of like a normal interview, but it's about as close to a guaranteed position. What we hear from a lot of our recruiters is they try their hardest to help their pathways interns find somewhere. If it's not in their office, they try to get them in their department. If it's not, or their agency. If it's not in their agency, they try to keep them in federal government. The whole path is really, the whole idea is to really get talented students like yourselves to make a career in federal government. And this is one program. Whereas the general internship, which is most of what we're talking about today, is just for a semester, it's unpaid, you know, it can be here in DC or it can be at an embassy around the world, but, and it's a full-time position for 10 weeks, I believe. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. All right, and I do have one from Grace, who is in an area that's very busy, so she can't talk. But she was curious about the impact that political affiliation or past political experience has on how the State Department evaluates your application. It's a very good question, Grace. Thank you for bringing it. Tina, did you want to give this one a stab?
Sure. So for the most part, when you're in the State Department, you're at the service of the current administration. However, it does not mean that you have to be in sort of that political affiliation in order to serve and in order to intern. What my advice has always been is to, if you are politically, if you're leaning in one direction or the other, try to be as middle of the road as you can within your ethics and sort of your own views. Try not to be as polarizing. And that's where it becomes a problem, because you may be less likely to work successfully in an office if you are so completely opposed to everything the office is doing. We want to look at these experiences as learning opportunities. And so at the same time, you're getting something from this, even if it's not directly in line. So what I've had a lot of was after the 2016 election, we found that a lot of our more liberal students, and this is across the DC area, really across the world, but a lot of the more liberal leaning students were uncomfortable working in this administration. This is your career. So administration is 4 to 8 years, and we move on as a society. We're talking about long-term careers. So I don't want you guys to feel like you shouldn't work for the State Department because you are unhappy with who is elected this year or who is currently in administration, or whatever that looks like. You certainly can. You just want to be careful with how you're wording things in your resume. I've had students who had some concerns about, and this is an example, one was very, 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 very pro-life, and was in a lot of the work that they did was focused on that particular issue and that particular population. What I tend to do is, instead of sort of focusing on that particular challenge, focus on the transitional skills that you have, that you've gained from whatever project you're working on, whatever your issue is that you're sort of not attacking, but addressing at that time. And so let's say if it is pro-life and you're very focused on that, if the work that you did working for that type of organization is about leadership skills, about administrative skills, database management, outreach, that kind of stuff, that's what I want you to highlight, not specifically the pro-life aspect of it, if you will. We have a lot of students who may work for work on the Hill for in a Republican office, and if the election goes a different way, they're concerned that that may be seen as a negative, and it isn't. Again, you want to highlight the skills that you have that you could use in any office and for any administration, if that's helpful.
Yeah. And I'll just add that, you know, when we look at federal government positions in general, whether it's the State Department or any other agency, every federal person actually takes the same oath of office that the president takes to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. So that is your primary, like, job duty. If nothing else, that is what you are doing. And so, you know, the amount of work that a federal worker does, that's just upholding the law, I'd say like 90% of their job continues regardless of who's in the administration. It's only often if you're working directly with a political appointee or in, I'll say, like some really hot button offices where the current administration will really have a direct impact. But typically as an intern, like, that it doesn't boil down quite as much. You know, this year could be interesting if, depending on the outcome of the election, you know, there could be a new administration in charge. There could be a lot of movement and a lot of change going on at the State Department and other agencies. So that's just something to keep in mind, is you're applying during a Republican administration for what could become a Democratic administration. So just keep that in mind when you apply. You know, that's kind of part of what happens when you're in federal government. Excuse me, sorry.
Bless you.
Sorry. I have another question from someone who can't talk due to their environment, from Caitlin. And she asked about whether intending to go to graduate school immediately after undergrad would make you a continuing student that's eligible to intern at the State Department after senior year. Yes, I believe you have to show proof that you are enrolled or will be enrolled. So you'll need to, you know, save that enrollment letter or save any, you know, deposits that you have or receipts for ensuring your enrollment. But yes, you do count as a continuing student. Okay. And we have one question from Mitchell. Any tips we might have regarding structuring an effective essay for the internship application? This is a very good question. And I think, Tina, would you agree that this is probably like the #1 question we get?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So to that end, there is a brochure. Like I said, I pointed you the handshake article. I'm going to share my screen real quick so that you can see what it is that I'm looking at. It's also available on, like, if you just search for Google, but it can be a little bit hard to find. So this page is on Handshake. It's under resources. It's called Careers in Government. It's very similar to what's on our webpage, the Career Center website. But what I want to show you on the left is the attachments, because one, there's a couple of different things about federal resumes that are worth looking at. If you're like, what's a federal resume? I've never heard of that before. How do I write one? There's some good examples here, but what I wanted to talk about right now is the Department of, this one that starts with Department of State. It's actually a PDF. It's a few years old, but the application hasn't changed that much. And it's all about the internship program, and it has some tips, you know, a little bit, some of it's on the website, the structure, looking at the different offices. They have a link to employee videos. But what they have, they talk about some of the different types of learning that you might do, eligibility requirements, and then they talk about the actual application and what are the different things that you must do. And here it talks about a statement of interest, and it shows here that it's 2,500 characters. They rely heavily on the statement of interest. So above all, you want to make sure it's really well written. So you're well written, free of spelling and grammatical errors. That's where you can come to drop-ins every day from 1 to 3 p.m. and someone can help you make sure that you know, don't have any sentences that just cut off in the middle of your paper. You want to talk about academic or personal areas of interest, foreign language skills, or other skill sets that make you particular to or useful to a given bureau, office, or overseas post. They usually say to name at least 2 offices. Now, whether that's a bureau here in DC or a particular post overseas, you do the area bureau and then like the embassy within that area bureau. And then they also want to know about specific disadvantages you've overcome or personal experiences that make you unique. So that's really general. What I have found is, you know, there are certain bureaus out there that are very popular right now, and those will be the most competitive. So if you are, say, interested in anti-terrorism, Middle Eastern affairs, Russia, China. Those areas tend to be the most popular ones that I see. And if that is truly where your interest lies, by all means apply for those, but just know that the competition is going to be fierce. So when you're writing your essay, you're going to want to make it really clear why you want those bureaus or why you're interested in that areas. We do see a lot of, I'm a government student, I'm an SFS student, I'm studying international relations or international policies, or, you know, have a language background in this area. And therefore I am interested and I'm a good student. That is not the type of essay. One essay I saw that I remember just being completely wowed by was somebody who actually, I forget the student's actual major, but they had done a number of internships in like the communications and social media realm, not necessarily by intent, but they ended up really enjoying it. And they really believed in the mission of the State Department, but really wanted to work in their Bureau of Public Affairs. So they actually wrote their essay about how they believed in telling the story of American democracy and getting that word out to American citizens and citizens around the world. And that person was successful in getting an internship. So, you know, something that is personal to you, that is relatable and really, again, shows that you understand not just the mission of the State Department. You know, that's awesome if you want to be Secretary of State. I think a lot of us on this call probably have thought about that at one point or another, myself included. But really, like, why this bureau, why this office? Tina, what do you have to add?
Sorry, I live near Andrews and there's a plane going by, so I needed to mute for a second. Sorry. But one of the things, to your point about just even basic grammatical errors, give me 1 second, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry, it got like, it was hovering over my house. So, but just something as simple as using the Writing Center. So the Writing Center won't review your essay looking for the content. They're focused on the structure and the grammar and that sort of thing. But it's fantastic just to have another set of eyes on it. Just in something as simple as downloading Grammarly on your systems has been really helpful. One, you should use it in everyday life because some of the social media posts that definitely could benefit from it. But just using it will help you to, even if you're using redundant phrases, things like that, it'll help you to identify the tone, and if it's giving off the sort of tone that you want the statement of interest to give off. And so those are just some things, some really simple things you can do, because as you're reading it the way that you want it perceived. It doesn't always mean that that's the way that it's coming off. And so you'll definitely need another set of eyes to do that. And back to the point of submitting it ahead of time, this will give you more time to make sure you get that done, that you're not running up against the clock to submit your documents as well. So that's just something else there that I think you should consider. But I think that the document that was shared is a fantastic guide. And this will take some time. It's not just a very quick thing. So you want to give yourself a few days to go through the application and take your time. So if you need to take a break from it and come back to it to fill out other parts as well. You only have 2,500 characters to use, but you do have a lot. I think you have 4,000 characters per job description in your federal resume. So think about that. If there's some things you don't want to reiterate exactly what you've written for each job description on your resume. So you want to use that space, since you have more space, to really talk about what you've done there and the things that you want to convey, and then use your statement of interest in a more interesting way and not just regurgitating your resume.
Yeah. And like for your resume, you know, I see a lot of times, you know, students, you guys are researching and you're analyzing. And so maybe in an internship, you say, I researched and analyzed something in support of a project. Well, that's for a one-page resume. That's pretty good thing to say. But like to Tina's point, that you have more space, like walk me through the research process. Like, what was your hypothesis? What were the specific methodological tools that you used to do your research? You know, were you talking primary source literature, secondary source literature? Did you do interviews? Did you do focus groups? You know, what was it? How was it? If you were looking at data and numerical information, you know, what types of programs were you using? What types of, you know, variables were you examining? Go ahead and be specific about you know, verbs like research, analyze, coordinated. those are good verbs, but they also cover a lot of other things within them. So within your federal resume, you don't have a page limit. You have, you know, typically in an undergraduate student, I see usually they're about 3 to 5 pages, but you have the space to go much more in depth into like the actual step-by-step things that you have done in support of an overall goal. So that's another tip as well.
We have a hand raised.
Yeah, I see that. Sorry. Okay, Zachary, I'll get you in a moment. I have one other quick question. Do we anticipate that global health will be especially competitive? I would say potentially with everything that's going on. I could see it being, I'd say more so than in the past, but global health isn't also for everybody. So if that's an area of interest for you, Kate, that you're really excited about and you've taken classes in it or you've interned in similar type of programs, I'd say go ahead and give it a shot. So then also we have another question about how many interns do they take on every year? How many students apply? I do not know the answer to that specifically. However, I do know that it is one of the most competitive internship programs out there. Not just in federal government, but across the board. We could maybe reach out and see if we could get an answer, but I would gather tens of thousands of applicants because don't forget you're competing against one another and you all are very excellent at what you did. Otherwise you wouldn't be here at Georgetown. You're competing against other schools in the Beltway, GW, American, Catholic, etc. You're also competing against top candidates from every other school in the country. Harvard, Yale, your top level state schools, UVA, Michigan, UCLA, Berkeley, you name it, top candidates who are interested in international relations have their eyes on a State Department internship as well. And Tina and I were chatting beforehand, because the internship program was canceled this past summer, a lot of those students have been encouraged to apply again. So I anticipate this summer being even more competitive than the last summer. So just take that into consideration. I'd say it's about as competitive as getting into a selective college. So.
Maybe a bit more.
Maybe a little bit more, yeah. All right, so Zach, okay, you had your hand raised, so go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
This was just a question off of, that's why I raised my hand, because it was off of something that Tina said. When it comes to writing the statement of interest, and then also using your space on your resume, I guess my fear/question is that there might be so much information on your resume that some important things might get lost in there. So would it be a good idea to if it's really pertinent to the office you're applying to, highlighting again something in specific you might have done in your statement of interest?
You can. I want you to tell a story though. And so again, you're not regurgitating what you've already written, but if you think that there are points that really solidify who you are as a candidate, then that's what you want to pull out. So in each bullet, you don't want it to get buried, but perhaps start your top 2 bullets are the key factors that you really want to demonstrate. And then you want to follow that with other things that you can do that are more transferable. That's where I'd like for you to focus. You just have more room in each job description, so you have more space to kind of tell everything, and you don't have as much real estate on the statement of interest. So I don't want you to waste that space repeating what they can read in the actual resume. But tell your story. So what makes you well-rounded? So again, I think Beth said that you don't want to say, oh, I'm really interested in the State Department and I'm a really smart student. So is everybody else. So what makes you more unique and what makes you a better fit than the other students that you would be competing against?
And the other thing on the federal resume is even though it is long, they do read it in its entirety. There is a very specific equation that they use. The reason you'll see they ask about like how many hours a week did you work, and for how long did you work, and who was your supervisor, and if you made money, how much you make. That all goes into an equation on the back end where basically they try to put together and prove like, okay, this student has 2 years of experience doing A, 1 year of experience doing B. And it's a way that they use to show like who is most qualified versus less qualified. And so they do read everything in the federal resume. And that's part of the reason why they are having you fill out the federal resume builder. So that's where when we say like put down every relevant experience, often in a general 1-page resume, like to Tina's point, like you pick maybe the best example of a specific skill. So like the best example you have of doing analysis, or the best example you have of, showing diplomatic engagement. Whereas in the federal resume, you pull out every time you demonstrate a certain skill set if it's relevant to the job description. So every time you really researched and analyzed and wrote a paper, or every time you helped to coordinate a large event, and that's sometimes where the length comes from. So you do look at your federal resume and you're like, oh my gosh, this is getting really repetitive. Are they really looking at this? They really are.
I think the difference too between this particular program and other opportunities you may apply to state is they're looking at every single applicant, and then using that algorithm to find the best person. In other opportunities, they're looking at the first 50 who apply, and there's a cutoff usually at 50, which I think is absurd, but I don't run it. There's a cutoff of 50, and even if you are the most qualified applicant, if you're applicant number 51, you're out of luck until the next go round. So this isn't that. This, you really get a fair shot to present your very best self and have them evaluate that.
Okay, we have a question from Anya about how the VSFS internship program compares to the full-time internship. So the VSFS program has been around for about a decade. It really became popular this past summer because of the current coronavirus pandemic. But the whole, and it's run by the State Department, but any agency can participate. So even though it's like says it's like the State Department VSFS program, there's projects in there from all over the government. They tend to be part-time and they're project-based. So with VSFS, there's a specific project that you will do, and sometimes it's for a semester, sometimes it's for 6 weeks, sometimes it's throughout the whole year. And it's not an internship per se. Some of them feel like it. I've known some students who've had some amazing experiences that I think have helped them to understand what it's like to work in the federal government, but sometimes within the State Department itself. And those applications open over the summer for like the following school year. But I believe that with the current situation with the coronavirus and into the future, I think, those types of project-based opportunities as opposed to a quote unquote internship, I think we'll be seeing more and more of that as time goes on, because a lot of employers are recognizing that those types of things sometimes are in some ways more helpful for them than a quote unquote internship program. Does that answer your question, Anya? If not, we're happy to elaborate. Okay.
The other thing
She
that
said yes.
we mentioned too was because so many students are sort of coming back to reapply because it was canceled this summer, for the folks who are reapplying, you want to demonstrate what you did in the meantime. So did you sit sort of on your hands and, oh, my internship was canceled, oh, well, I guess I'll wait? Or did you find another opportunity? Did you do some project work? Did you strengthen your language skills? What did you do, and how did you sort of demonstrate resiliency during this time when you couldn't do the internships you may have planned for? So think about how you can incorporate what you did this summer if you're reapplying and you had gotten a previous offer, or if you didn't get an offer, and just what have you done during this time? Let's say your other plans were canceled. If you had plans to study abroad and those were canceled, or if let's say it's not if you intended to study abroad, but if you were admitted to a program and were going to study abroad and that didn't happen, it's very likely that there won't be many opportunities to study abroad this spring. So keep that in mind too, and how you'll pivot to sort of keep that experience level without without having to do what you were planning to do, because it's a different world, things are changing. And I don't anticipate that we'll be back to normal by January. So I think we need to, so Beth mentioned earlier, that in addition to planning for this for next summer, plan for some plan A's or plan B's, plan C's, probably plan F in there somewhere, and just a couple of alternatives in case either this doesn't go through because of coronavirus or something else, or if it doesn't, if for some reason your application isn't as strong. You guys will have very strong applications, but it is highly competitive, so you want to have some backup plans as well.
Okay, any other questions about the internship application? Or even just about State Department in general? Anything else? Okay, yeah, Mitchell. Okay, a technical question. Does an unofficial transcript downloaded from My Access, can it be used on the application? I am not sure about that. Tina, yeah, I'm just wondering. Usually they have, let's see. Oh no, it says on the pamphlet, it says students must provide proof of student status in the form of an official or unofficial transcript. If using official transcripts, you must attach them to your applications per the instructions provided in USA Jobs. And yeah, so just read what it says in USA Jobs under the required documents section very, very clearly. And, you know, make sure it's in whatever format they want, you know, if it's a PDF or rich text or whatever the case may be, because government computers on the back end, a lot of times, like they don't have, they're not quite as up to speed sometimes as some of other departments. So there's certain types of files that they can't read on the back end, their system. So just make sure to read carefully. But it sounds like, yeah, you can do an unofficial transcript.
Yeah, and you can upload it. It doesn't state right here what format, but PDF is probably most widely accepted.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other questions?
Well, I mean, if there aren't any, I do encourage you all to utilize some of the resources that were shared. Some is available every day from 1 to 3 for drop-in hours, drop-in coaching hours. Beth and I also have open appointment hours this week. Actually, I'm done with appointment times, but if there's something that happens and you guys need something, please feel free to reach out.
Yep.
If it goes outside of our schedule, we have a lot of appointment slots open though, so
yeah,
we should have enough space to accommodate as many people as possible. If not us, someone else from our teams.
Yep, I have one question about balancing the internship with your Georgetown program. It is full-time, so over the summer, you just want to be mindful, like if you're taking summer classes, what time they'll be. So trying to get, like, you know, the evening classes, and then working with your supervisor to try and figure out your schedule. But they are looking at full-time. I know some students who have tried to do the full-time internship in the fall or winter semesters. For that, I really recommend talking to your dean, because it is still a full-time requirement. Obviously, if you go to another, like if you go to an embassy and you're going to be out of the country, that presents some choices you need to make about enrollment, and enrollment can impact a number of other issues as well. So you want to make sure that if you're hoping to do it during the fall or the spring, that you talk to your dean. And again, you'll need to be creative with your schedule. So maybe you're not taking 16 credits, maybe you're taking 12, and they're all at night. So you can go to the State Department during the day and you take your courses at night. So that's just something, you know, you can talk to us about, but also make sure you involve your academic dean as well. Anything else? And I would say for anybody who is looking at the security clearance process, just make sure you keep your nose clean. And by that, I mean, in particular, we get a lot of questions about substance use. Usually they require a year free from use of federally illegal substances. So for example, pot is legal in the district and Colorado and a number of other locations where you're not breaking any state rules or local rules if you smoke pot, but you are breaking a federal law, and the State Department goes by federal law. So you need to remain drug-free for at least a year. That's typically a question they ask. That also includes misuse of prescription drugs, as well as if you have anything like a minor in possession on your record. So if it's been more than a year, you're good. If not, and again, this is only for certain positions within the State Department, you know, just be honest, whatever the case may be. Don't lie, because that's when you really get into trouble and you can get blocked for a while. But if you have any other questions about clearances, we can also answer that. I see one about having a minor traffic ticket. I think as long as you paid it and you're like, you know, you don't have it like stuffed in your glove compartment and you have like, you know,
where it's not a chronic problem.
Yeah, it's not a chronic problem.
If it's not like me and my speeding ticket. So I'm never working for the state. I tell you, it's not me. The cameras find me. But if it's a chronic problem, then it's what it essentially is showing that you think that rules don't apply to you. And so, so you want to make sure it's the same thing for underage drinking, which is huge with this crowd, not you, but the general college crowd. So you want to make sure if those are questions that may come up. And again, it depends on which department you're applying to. Illegal downloading comes up. So you want to be careful of that too when it comes to movies and music and just things that we don't think about, but we know are wrong. It's really, a lot of times it's a matter of ethics. And so you have to think about like, be honest. And if you're honest, that's usually something that they can deal with versus, oh, we found out that you lied about drinking coca tea when you were in Colombia. Like that's a problem.
Yeah. So just, if they ask like, have you had any traffic violations in the last 3 years? And you have, then you just say yes. And they usually ask for like a little description. So just like Tina said, just be honest. And for that, they're often looking for things that can be used as blackmail against you. And that's part of the reason why they ask about it, because if they know about it, then they know what to expect. You know what to expect. You know, it's kind of all out there in the open.
And your credit. So paying your bills, paying your credit card bills. You shouldn't have issues with student loans, but if you're in a ton of debt, that could be an issue if your debt is not being managed. Obviously, you guys are, a lot of you may be in debt, you're students, it happens. But other like outstanding debt, credit card bills, things like that, phone bills,
Gambling.
those things should be paid. Yeah.
Gambling problems. You
just want to be mindful of that sort of stuff and just make sure things are, you don't have to have a perfect credit score by any stretch of the imagination, but one of the questions that comes up in a background check when they're doing their interviews or with other people to talk about sort of you is, I've had this happen before when I've had interviewers ask me about new students going into state. Do they have any money problems? And I'm like, well, she's a student. So like that's, it's sort of, but anything that's like outstanding, that's just not normal for a typical college student. So you want to be mindful of that and just make sure things are paid on time, as close to on time as possible, so that you're not seen as a more susceptible to blackmail, because people who want to blackmail you say, oh, I'll pay off all your debt if you give me these secrets. That's it.
Okay, any last questions? We're coming up on the hour, so I want to be mindful that you all have classes and other responsibilities, but like Tina said, we both have appointments open via Handshake. If you go under industry advising, you can find, mine is government, nonprofit, and education. And Tina, what is yours listed as?
International affairs, VSFS.
Yeah. So you have us at your disposal, drop-ins every day from 1 to 3 p.m. just to have those documents looked at to make sure that they are error-free and, you know, make a logical sense. That can be a great place too. It's only like 15 minutes max. But yeah, so good luck with everything. You know, Georgetown students by and large are really successful at State Department internships. So even though this is going to be a competitive round, we have every confidence that many of you will be successful. And if anything, anytime you apply to a job, it's good practice for your next application. So, you know, if you take it seriously and you put in the work, you know, you will definitely get something from it, if not the internship that you desire. So, all right. Well, thank you everybody for your time, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.